What's up guys, I'm back with another language learning video, and today I want to share why and how I'm studying with podcasts, okay? So first of all, why should we use podcasts while learning languages? That's a good question, it's an important question, right? Why do we do it? And to me, we can separate language learning into three big parts, okay? The first one is vocabulary and grammar. You need to know that. You need to work on that. It's not fun, but you have to do it. The second one is reading and writing. Okay, this can be conversations with WhatsApp or different applications. This can be reading a book or even writing a book. And we have the third part, which is listening and speaking. And this is the part. The third part is where you actually get in contact with people. Okay, where you actually use what you learned, so you interact with people face to face. And even though if you're not able to speak fluently or to figure out the right words in the right moment, it's very, very useful if you do understand what your opponent is saying, okay? So there are a lot of times when I try to speak to someone, let's say in English or maybe in Russian, and I don't find the real words or the good words, the right fitting words. They don't mind, okay? They got the plus, they do understand what I want to say, and they help me to figure out the right words. So this is no problem. But what is a big problem is if you don't understand what the person sitting in front of you is trying to tell you, and you just don't understand it because of the flow of words or the choice of words or the speed of language. So listening is a very, very important part if you really want to use a language and interact with people. So this is, in my point of view, a very good reason why you should use podcasts, just to get comfortable with listening the language. The second important part, or the second part why I think language learning with podcasts is very good and useful, is because you save a crazy amount of time. So, like, personally, every time when I'm on my bike or in my car, I listen to a podcast, okay? And this is not even only for language learning. This can be for every field that you want to get good at or you want to get some knowledge about. You can listen to podcasts everywhere. So every time when I ride my bike to work or when I'm on my way to the gym with my car or something, I listen to a podcast. And if you add up all those times you listen to a podcast in the year, in a week, or in a month, it's a huge amount of time that you spend listening to the language that you actually want to learn, okay? And there are tons of more options. Let's say simple tasks like cooking in the kitchen or gardening or cleaning up your room. You can always have some AirPods in and just listen to the podcasts. So it's easy to use it, and you don't really have to sit down and work on it. I do that. I'm going to explain that later, but you can do it during a normal day, okay? So it's extra time that you're learning. Part 3, why I'm learning with podcasts is I think that podcasts can be a big part in the future because people don't have that much time anymore to sit in front of their phone or their TV and watch videos. They are very busy and they just want to seek in information. And so podcasts can be the next big thing, I guess. And there are some cool people out there who already do it, and I just want to support them, okay? So me personally, I really often listen to Russian with Max. Max is a cool Russian guy who is a teacher, and he explains his normal day life in Russian, and he uploads a weekly podcast. They are good quality, they are useful, so I think it's good to support him with his stuff and show some respect for it, yeah. So this is why I decided, or why I think it's good to learn with podcasts. Now, how do I do it? This is how I do it. The first time when there's a new podcast, I try to find podcast. Yeah, okay, so how do we find the right podcast? This is the first very important step. So when I was looking for podcasts, I figured out, or I learned from Max, he explained that in a Russian podcast, that you need to find something that is interesting to you, okay? So you want to listen to something that attracts your attention, yeah? That's very important. And you want to listen to podcasts that lasts for, let's say, 15 to 20 minutes, not more, because then you can't focus anymore, and not less, because you want to have a lesson, right? You want to get into it and not just like 3 to 5 minutes. That's trash. You don't go for a run for 3 to 5 minutes. At least you have to go 15 or 20 minutes. So this is what I look for, and then I found Russian with Max, which is pretty good for me. So first, look for something that is interesting to you, that is usable, and that has a good duration. So what I'm gonna do next, I don't listen to each new podcast every week. So I look for one podcast with a specific interesting topic to me, and then I work with this topic for 7 to 14 days, okay? So it's like working with the text, working with the podcast. And the first time I hear the podcast, just when I'm on my bike, or I don't know, just listen to it and try to understand as much as I can. And it's very important that you understand at least 50% of the content. Because if you don't understand 50%, it's very hard to get the plot and to follow, and it's frustrating. So it's good if you do understand, let's say 70%, 80, or even 90%. That's crazy good. That's very, very helpful. But at least you should understand 50%. And then what I do is, after the first time that I listened to the whole podcast and I figured out what's the plot, some important vocabs and vocabulary, and just the plot, then I sit down and listen to it again. And then I write down every single word that I don't understand. Let's say this podcast that I'm listening to right now, it is about love. Yes, что любовь. And I write just down every single word that I hear. I take a dictionary and I just write it down in Russian. And then I look for the translation, I write it down in German, and then I write down like an example with the word that I don't understand, okay? So the first word was отношения, all right? That means relationship. So I wrote down отношения между людьми. That means a relationship between people. So I already used it in a sentence. I spoke it, I wrote it down, I used it, and so it's in my head, okay? That's also some type of vocabulary learning. And I'm going to do this with the whole podcast. You can see this paper is already quite full. And after I did this, I'm going to listen to the podcast one more time with the paper in my hand. And then when I listen to the podcast and I hear those trigger words that I already wrote down, I just look them up. Oh, okay, yeah, I know, that one was relationship, okay. And then I just listen to the podcast one more time, and your mind starts to learn those vocabularies by itself, okay? So the next time when I'm in the car and listen to this podcast, and he's talking about отношения, I instantly know, okay, this was relationship. And then I do get more and more content about the podcast. I do understand more and more. And let's say after 20, 25, 30 times that I listen to this podcast, it's like I do understand everything. There are single words that are still complicated or that I didn't find in a dictionary or whatever. But actually most of the part I do understand. And this is when I leave the podcast to itself and start the new one, okay? The next one. So what are the benefits? What do I get out of those tricks with podcasts? So you learn a lot of new vocabularies, all right? So right now I'm learning a lot of vocabularies concerning love, which are useful when you talk to people and you want to talk about a relationship, right? Or when you want to talk about your feelings, that you fall in love or you got hurt or whatever. So I have a lot of new vocabularies that I can use. What else can you do? What is good benefit? The more often I hear this one specific podcast, I use this function in Apple iTunes that you can speed up the speed, okay? So I don't listen to 1 point speed, I listen to 1.25, okay? So it's faster than it's normal. And Russian with Mac, this guy speaks really clearly and slowly, that's good. But after, let's say, 10 or 15 times I listen to it, I just speed it up. So I get used to hearing Russian that is not that slow, not that clear, but more, okay, more speed, more faster. So this is also a benefit because it's almost like you know this podcast by heart after several times. So it's easier for you to get used to speaking fast and listening to people who speak fast, okay? Because if you would start with someone who speaks fast in the very beginning, it's hard to get all the words. But if you know what he's talking about, what he will say next, it's easier to learn this fast speaking skill, okay? And you can also use this tool in Apple iTunes that you slow it down. You can go with 1.5 speed, okay? So this is very, very useful when you are right at the beginning and don't know how to understand anything, so you can slow it down really, really slow and just listen to it word for word for word. Okay, so this is how and why I use podcast. I think there are several more reasons and points out there, but those are the ones that are in my mind right now. I just wanted to share that. Maybe it's useful for you, maybe you do it already and have some help and thoughts for me. Yeah, that's it. Enjoy your language learning.